I want to start by saying something before we get into anything else. If money was never talked about in your house growing up, you didn't miss the conversations because your parents didn't care about you. You missed it because they didn't have it either. The conversations or the knowledge or the model for how to talk about money in a healthy way. Nobody gave it to them, and so they couldn't give it to you. And that's not failure on their part, that's a pattern. And patterns can be broken, and they should be broken when they no longer serve you or they're not currently serving you. Today, we're having the money conversation most families never had, the one about what the silence actually did and what it's been doing for your finances ever since. And here's what we're going to cover today: the silence in your family and what it taught you, the three things that it taught you about money before you ever earned a dollar. We're going to name all three. And then we're going to talk about how those three things are showing up in your financial decisions right now, probably in ways you've never connected to where they come from before. And then we're going to talk about what it actually looks like when someone breaks this pattern, not just understands it, but actually changes it. Let's work. Now, here's something that most people don't fully understand about children. Sometimes I hear people just say, they're not paying attention or they're not listening. Children are not neutral observers at all. They're always making meaning out of the stuff that they hear or that's happening around them. So when something happens around them or when something doesn't happen, they don't experience it as like neutral. They experience it as information. They're always taking in information and they assign a meaning to it. And the meaning becomes a belief that shapes how they see the world for a very long time. So when money was never discussed in your house, the silence wasn't just an absence, it was a message. And depending on what the energy around money felt like in your home, you probably received one of three messages. The first message that you may have received unconsciously is, money is dangerous. So if every time money came up and something got tense or somebody changed the subject or left the room, or your nervous system registered that as a threat signal, then money equals something unsafe in your house. And that association got wired in before you ever had a dollar of your own. The second thing that may have been wired in is that money is shameful. So if the silence around money felt humiliating or like the subject was too embarrassing to touch, you probably received the message that there's something wrong with your family's money situation, something to hide. And that shame probably followed you into adulthood, into every financial decision and conversation that you've avoided ever since. The third is that money is something other people manage. So in homes where money was never really discussed, children often arrive at adulthood with no model for how to engage with money, not how to think about it, not how to talk about it, or how to make intentional decisions with it. Not because they weren't smart, but because nobody showed them that money was something that you engage with deliberately. And now here's what I really want you to hear. None of these three beliefs requires a difficult childhood to form. None of them require poverty or trauma or financial hardship or conflict or crisis. They form in completely ordinary, loving, functional homes and families where nobody ever sat down and explained what the silence meant. The silence was a message and you received it. In my family, nobody ever talked about money. And so I started to see the decisions that people made with money, and a lot of those I carried into my adult life. And a lot of the information I didn't have, so I just made haphazard financial decisions. I applied for credit cards in college just because nobody taught me, like, this is a credit card, you're going to have to pay this back. I see this now too a lot on social media. You'll see, it was a pretty viral video of a daughter crashing out because she didn't realize that the money that she was charging on her credit card she was going to have to pay back, and her mom was like, Well, who'd you think was going to have to pay it? But they had never had the conversation, so she kind of just thought it was free money, so she was buying all type of stuff. And then when she realized that that new interest and those new payments were hers, she was crashing. So a lot of parents aren't having those conversations, and it doesn't mean that it was necessarily a dysfunctional household. A lot of this can happen in pretty normal, ordinary households. I want to talk about what those 3 messages look like in adult financial life, because this is where most people start to recognize themselves. If you receive the message that money is dangerous, you probably avoid looking at your finances even when things are okay. So you just develop like an avoidance. And it's not necessarily because something is wrong, but because looking makes you feel unsafe. So the account doesn't get checked, the statement doesn't get opened, or the full financial picture never really gets fully examined all at once because it's too much. And the painful part is that the person is often highly functional in every other area of their life. They're doing well professionally, they're capable and intelligent and on top of everything else. But when it comes to looking at the money directly, something happens that they can't fully explain. It's like a resistance or a pulling away. And it's a discomfort that doesn't make logical sense to them. And that discomfort has a name. It's the body's memory of what engaging with money once felt like. So if you receive the message that money is shameful, you might have had a hard time talking about money with the people closest to you, your partner, your children, your parents even. The subject feels like it's off limits or taboo in a way you just can't fully explain. And it's not because you don't have a real interest in it or because you don't care about money, but because the conversation itself feels like it's crossing a line that you don't know that was drawn. And so the silence replicates and it continues into your relationship, into your household, and into the next generation. If you receive the message that money is something that other people manage, you might be the type of person that's handed all financial responsibility to a partner or a family member, and you stay deliberately out of it. Not because you don't have an interest or you're just lazy or unmotivated, but because that was the only model that you had for how to relate to money. And the problem with this is that you can't protect what you don't understand. And the silence that felt like safety in childhood becomes a different kind of vulnerability in adulthood. Here's what I want to ask specifically for the high earners that may be watching this video. The more income you have, the more expensive this pattern becomes, because the financial complexity at your income level requires active engagement. It requires you to look, and the person who learned that looking is dangerous or shameful or not their job is navigating all of that complexity with a nervous system that was never taught that it was safe to engage. And that gap shows up in the account statements, whether you're looking at them or not. So let's see what breaking the patterns actually looks like. What does it actually look like when someone breaks the pattern? I want to tell you what I see in my practice because I think it might surprise you. It doesn't start with a financial product, right? It doesn't start with a better budget or a new investment account. It actually just starts with a conversation that most of my clients have never had with anybody. And the first thing that I always ask before we look at a single number, you may have heard me say this before, is what did money feel like in your house? When you were growing up, what did it feel like? Not what happened with money, not how much your parents made, but how it felt. And the people who grew up in the financial silence almost always have the same answer. I don't know, we didn't talk about it, or I have no idea what was actually going on. And then I watch the moment where they start to connect the dots, where they realize that not knowing wasn't neutral, that it taught them something, and that what it taught them is still running in the background. That moment is where the real work begins, because from there, things start to shift in really specific ways. They start to look at their accounts, not all at once and not without some discomfort because they've been carrying this for a long time, but more regularly and more directly. And the act of looking becomes less threatening as it becomes more familiar. They start having the money conversations with their partner. And it may be a little awkward at first, maybe in pieces, but the seal gets broken and what was once completely off limits becomes something they can navigate together. They start making financial decisions actively instead of out of default. And the one that moves me the most is they start talking to their children about money, not lecturing, not anxiously, just talking, naming what things cost, explaining what decisions they're making and why, and giving their children the one thing that they never had, a model of an adult who engages with money directly and treats it as something that can be understood, discussed, and handled without shame. And that's how the silence ends, not with a perfect financial plan, though. That matters, but with one person who decides that the pattern stops here. And you can be that person. The silence didn't start with you, but it can end with you. I often watch my clients, once they get that realization, then they feel more comfortable bringing in their children. They start teaching them about money, about investing, and what once was this complicated, or what felt like a complicated, scary conversation now becomes a little lighter, and they're passing down to the next generation a freedom and a conversation and an awareness of money that they didn't have and their parents didn't have. Something in this video, name something you've been carrying. I want you to know that recognition matters. It means something just became visible that was once invisible before. If you're ready to have the real money conversation, not the budgeting version, but the real one, that's exactly the work that I do every day. The link to book a complimentary strategy calls in the description. 45 minutes, no pitch, no pressure, just an honest look at where you are and what's actually possible from here. If this video landed for someone in your life, share it with them. Remember that the silence ends when someone decides to speak. I'll see you in the next one.